All right, so we got to make sure all this stuff is working. I tested it before, but with technology, you can test things all you want, and it still doesn't guarantee it to work. All right, so we're going to try that. That works. Good. We got a screen. We've got. Do we have a clicker? Let's see. We have a clicker. Oh. Also, you got to turn things on. So let's see if the clicker works. Is this not clicking? But let's try again. Reset. Always turn it off and turn it on. Nope, was it working? Awesome. Sweet, it's working. It's just not working on my screen, which is what allows me to see what I'm actually talking about. I don't think. Well, it's fine. It's working up here. It's good enough for me. All right. Hi, everybody. Jesse Flores. I am the Chief Web Pro of SuperWebPros. We build, maintain, and accelerate websites and web systems for companies here in the Lansing area and actually now and in Grand Rapids. And so that's as part of our 2019. I hope to be able to add more and more cities to that name. So what we're going to cover today, this is, I've got about 20 minutes or so. Disclaimer, I tend to talk really quickly, so I won't be offended if someone's like, hey, you're talking really quickly, like slow down a little bit, so just let me know, I won't be offended. I love this stuff, it's super interesting. And so what we're going to cover today, so I'm going to share with you this thing called the hungry business metaphor. It's something that we use internally and is also going to be informing some of our things going into 2019. I'm going to talk about why automation software, and I'm assuming we probably have different degrees of familiarity with automation, so that's why this is the beginner's guide. So if you're somebody who's already like a HubSpot pro, I'm sorry, I'm going to sorely disappoint you most likely, but if you're not, which I'm assuming most of us probably are not, maybe this will be interesting. We'll also talk about 3.5 places to use automation software. Then I'll talk about some of the limits and pitfalls of automation software. And then I'll share with you guys some software to check out. And then at the end, I'll also have some of the tools that I'll have a link to the presentation where you can download this later if you want it. Disclaimer, as I mentioned, this is like the tip of an iceberg. So I recommend subscribing to our stuff to learn more and to follow some of the things that we're doing. All right, so we're going to start with the hungry business metaphor. We talk about this internally all the time, and there's 4 things every business needs to do if it wants to survive, and especially if it wants to thrive. First thing it has to do is it has to hunt, right? This is the first thing. This is what your salespeople are out there doing all the time. They're out there trying to prospect and find new business. Second thing that has to do is has to nurture. That's supposed to be a guy milking a cow. I realize my drawing's not awesome, right? I'm not going to win any awards. But it has to nurture your existing leads. It has to nurture your existing customers. Also has to do a pretty good job of gathering in the leads that are coming in through your sales pipeline. And then finally, it has to remember this is a repeating process. It's never done. You always have to be measuring and improving and using data to get better over time. So the hungry business hunts, nurtures, gathers, and recognizes it needs to do this in a repeating fashion. So what does automation software do? So in the old days, right, if you were a hunter, you might have gone out and hunted with a spear. Today you use a rifle. Automation software replaces your spears with firearms, your nets with traps, and I couldn't think of a gathering thing, so I just said gathering with agriculture. The point is that, and then it uses data to get better over time. But really what it is, it's about taking the stuff that you're already doing and actually starting to allow you to reduce or eliminate the routine, monotonous work that that's involved in business development, whether that's sales or marketing or nurturing. The way I see it, smart automation should be extending your team, allowing you to focus on the right work with less effort. So where are some places where we might want to use this kind of automation? So there are 3 that I can think of, and there's probably more. Actually, I know there's more. I thought about more while I was driving here. But there's 3 that I would start with. First is inbound lead nurturing. Second, outbound prospecting. And then finally, systems integration. And I'll go through examples of each of these. And then the half point here is e-commerce. And I have e-commerce as a half because e-commerce is a special animal. And there's some really cool things you can do with e-commerce that you might not do if you're B2B or B2C in a service industry. So let's start with inbound lead nurturing and automations here. So inbound lead nurturing allows you to nurture your customers or prospects based on dates, events, or behavioral triggers. These are the frameworks that I think about most often. So what's an example of a date-based trigger? Something like a webinar or a seminar. So here, and this is not as bright as we'd like it to be, but here's an example of an automation series that you might have for something like a webinar. You have a sign-up landing page, which somebody fills out, says, hey, I'm going to attend this event, takes them to a thank you page, and this is actually something we built for one of our customers, right? When that form gets filled out, we send a thank you email that says something to the effect of like, hey, thanks, you're registered for this webinar. Now we know that there's a certain date at which this webinar is going to happen. So this is date-based because we know there's a certain point in time at which this event is going to happen. And so we work backwards and say, all right, a couple days before the webinar, we want to send out reminders, right? So if you're gonna have a party, right, you send out all these RSVPs and you sort of hope and pray and wait for people to show up. Well, you're going to get more people showing up if you remind them like, hey, we've got a party coming up. Right? And that's what automation does, right? You're not going to send out, let's say you've got this webinar, or let's say this event, we had like 40-something people register for it, right? Had we been sending out automations, and maybe we were, I don't know, you probably would have increased the likelihood that more and more people would show up because you're getting those reminders. But what you're not going to do, especially if you don't have the time, and I don't know about you, but I certainly don't have tons and tons of time to like send out lots of reminders. We would set up this sequence. So 3 days before, we would say, hey, this webinar is coming up. We might even have a call to action in there that says something to the effect of, this webinar is coming up. What's one thing you're hoping to get out of this? To start to get some engagement back, right? And we'll get into behavioral triggers in a little bit, but I would then use that as a behavioral trigger, right? Maybe the day before a webinar is going to happen or a seminar is going to happen, you would say, hey, don't forget, tomorrow this thing is happening. By the way, we're really excited because speaker ABC is an expert in XYZ, and they're going to be dropping all this knowledge on all this stuff, right? An hour before, and again, this works particularly well for a webinar where somebody's already on their computer. Hey, by the way, this is getting ready to start. And then finally, right before the webinar starts, this thing is starting now. Now, you're still not going to get 100% of those people showing up. Sometimes things come up, right? I know that certainly happens for me all the time. So on the back end, you would have a day after a webinar replay, right? And all of this, by the way, so these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 emails are all triggered automatically. So this is an example of a date-based automation sequence that we might be able to build to nurture somebody who maybe is a prospect, maybe they're a customer. It depends on the topic that we're looking at. An example of an event-based webinar is something that I tend to think of, and these lines are gray. I'm making them unnecessarily distinct to try and clarify some points. This is an example of an automation based on somebody opting in to an offer. So an event-based automation is one where I would say there's been some sort of event that's happened, and an event would be a trigger like downloading a resource or something like that. And so this is an example for a customer that we had in Dallas who was selling tip sheets to horse races for the Breeders' Cup, right? And so we had a landing page set up for them where you could download you click the button like, I want this free tip. What's the free tip I can get for this particular race? That popped up, that set up a pop-up. Somebody puts in their email address. We'll get back into these systems integrations in a little bit, but we dump that into a mailing list with some tags. But as soon as that happens, we take them to an offer page, right? And at this point here, based on how that person engages with the offer, do they decide they want to, they've just signed up for the free tip, then do they want to buy the tips just for Friday? Or what about Friday and Saturday? And based on what they're deciding, we send them down different paths to basically try and maximize the value that we can provide. On the back end, because we know that they've already opted in, they've got a free, they've got a free tip. I've gone way too far. They've got a free tip. We then send out reminders. So if somebody downloads this, let's say on Thursday, the races start Friday, we would have an automation on the back end saying on Friday, hey, by the way, you downloaded your free tip. Here's the races are getting ready to start on Friday. Do you want to buy the Friday tip sheet? And then on Saturday, do you want to buy the Saturday tip sheet? By the way, there's also a subscription option you could get, right? And again, all this is triggered with automation on the back end. So this is an example of event-based automation. Somebody downloaded a resource, and so we're following up with them automatically. Behavior-based automations are, and these can bleed in a little bit with event. Behavior-based, I tend to think of as you've demonstrated some level of engagement. So this is an example from a customer who has, without going too much into their business, they have a resource that allows you to measure this thing called orange peel. And orange peel is any time that you're, so you know how cars need to get painted? Well, sometimes when they're coming through manufacturing, right, there might be, you'll see beads of paint, right? That's a bad thing. That means the thing has to go back and be repainted. So these guys have technology that reduces the instances of that kind of thing happening, right? So in this particular case, their goal is to try and get someone who downloads maybe this guide to orange peel to get them to a sales rep, because the kinds of people that are downloading this stuff are going to be big manufacturers like somebody at GM or somebody at Packaging Corp or something like that. Anywhere where there's this kind of printing that needs to happen. And so we would have a behavioral trigger for this one. So we have the thank you. So someone downloads this guide. We have the thank you. But then based on whether or not somebody opens or responds to one of these emails, we then will send a note out to the sales rep saying, hey, this person demonstrated engagement. Or, and this is one of the other things we talked about, or maybe we score them. So we've got some logic in the back end that says, all right, maybe this title, so for instance, if I'm a plant engineer, that might be a more valuable conversation than like if I'm like a maintenance intern, right? And so here we use information about the customer as well as their engagement with the emails that we're sending them to determine what should we do next. So a behavior-based automation says you've engaged in a particular way. Now, based on your engagement, whether you opened an email or you clicked on a link, we might make a different decision. So some different examples of automations. So for a date-based automation, you might have something as simple as, it doesn't have to be a big sequence like I just showed you. It could be simple as a birthday reminder. You guys have probably all gotten these. I got a letter from Best Buy. My birthday's coming up in a couple of weeks, and so here's a Best Buy coupon, right? I guarantee you there's no rep at Best Buy sitting down thinking, oh man, I gotta send this guy a coupon, right? So a birthday reminder is a good example. Webinar, seminar. Anniversary of purchase is a good thing depending on your the ticket item, right? Anniversary of cancellation. So hey, have you ever gotten one of those emails? Hey, we miss you. Come back, right? Sometimes holidays. That could be a good, depending on your industry, that could be a good date-based automation you want to trigger. Whoops, that's supposed to say event-based, so event-based, not date-based again. So things like downloading a resource. Depending on the software you're using, you can send out, if you have somebody's email address and someone visits a specific web page, you can send out an automation based on the pages that they've visited. You might send out a response. If they fill out a contact form, sign up for a newsletter, create an account. These are all things where people have engaged, or these are all different events where people have done something to suggest, hey, I want to engage in some way and you want to follow up. And then of course, the behavior-based, I open an email, I click a link, responded to a message, maybe I added something to a cart. Right? So these are examples where somebody's action demonstrates some sort of forward momentum that you want to follow up on, but you don't necessarily want to be doing this personally every single time. The second type of automation is outbound prospecting. And this one is one that I think is huge. Lead nurturing, inbound marketing has been around for a little bit, but sales automation is on a tear right now. And in fact, we're finding that more and more of our customers are asking us to help with this because prospecting is a numbers game. And I don't know if you've ever had to do it, but it is a pain in the neck, especially business to business. The reality is that it's almost never going to be the case that somebody's going to pick up the phone or respond to an email the very first time you send them something. You sort of hear that the traditional wisdom is like 7 touches is finally when somebody's going to actually engage. Well, wouldn't it be great if there was software that helped you get to those 7 touches quicker and or allowed you to not get to 7 if somebody was already demonstrating engagement before that. That's just what outbound prospecting software does. So you might have a simple example. This is a very simple one that we set up for one of our customers. So they had a bunch of names that they'd collected at a trade show. These guys do trade shows every couple of weeks. And so they sent us a list of everybody that they met at a trade show. Now, they're constantly traveling, right? So as a sales rep, I'm like, I'm going to meet 100 people. I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to follow up. Let's touch base. But I'm on the plane to the next trade show, right? And so what we've got here is an automation that sends out, as soon as we get these into their prospecting software, hey, it was great to meet you at that thing. Why don't we schedule some time to meet? Hit reply or click this link and you'll get on my calendar. Okay, maybe a day later, depending on how you're organized, we might send up a note that says, hey, give this guy a call and leave him a voicemail. Just so that way you're hitting multi-channel, right? It's very rare, I think, and we haven't tested this yet 100%, so this is just my hypothesis. I think it's going to be very, very rare that you're going to convert entirely off of email. And so we tend to build in calls as part of these sequences when we're putting them together, because I think it's just going to be rare that you're going to just convert B2B enterprise off of email alone. Right, so maybe a couple days later, 3 days later, you send off a case study. Hey, we met at that trade show. You talked about A, B, C, and D. You want to see how we helped company XYZ solve A, B, C, and D? Check out this resource. A couple days later, we might set up a task to say, hey, call this person, but don't leave a voicemail because you don't want to look like you're spamming them too much, right? 5 days later, a week later, you might send another follow-up email that's like, hey, just getting this to the top of your inbox. Have you seen any, is now a good time to talk, right? And these, by the way, the difference between a sales-based automation and an inbound automation, you can be splitting hairs, but in a lot of cases, your sales automations are going to be like your quick, quippy. It looks like you're actually like firing this off on your iPhone, right? As opposed to your marketing automations are often going to be more branded, more like it's very clear that this person wanted to engage you. Your sales automations, generally speaking, frankly, they're cold in most cases, right? These are not situations where somebody is like super looking forward to hearing from you, right? What you're trying to do in these cases is get a meeting with someone, not necessarily nurture them through a product, right? Which might be different from the perspective of someone who comes in inbound. And then maybe after a couple of weeks, so let's say this whole thing runs the cycle of 10 business days. That's 2 weeks on the calendar. You might send like a breakup email, one, so you get it off of your queue, and also so that way you can let that person know, hey, look, I'm not trying to spam you. I thought we had a connection back over here. Turns out maybe now's not a great time. Why don't we try again in a couple of months? I'll tell you, experientially, we find that this email tends to convert pretty well. Because most people like to be pursued and they don't like to be broken up with, right? And so when you tell them, say, hey, look, okay, it looks like I misread this and it's it's not me, it's you. Then they tend to engage. Generally speaking, though, because these are cold, you're going to see lower engagement rates than you might on an inbound, and that makes sense. Someone inbound is actually looking for information, but on the outbound, this is a great way to streamline your prospecting. Third type of automations that we use pretty frequently are systems integrations. So systems integrations allow you to connect separate systems so you can keep data across other systems. And again, different people are going to use this in different ways. I'll give you a very simple example. We won't spend a lot of time here because I know this focus is on growth and this is more operations. But I'll just give you a simple example that we use internally, right? So somebody signs up to work with us. We send them a link to the credit card form. So everything we do is on a recurring billing Well, as soon as that person enters in their credit card, we automatically send that information to our CRM. And from there, we have a tool called Zapier. Actually, the CRM automatically creates welcome tasks. So that way we can make sure we send out this particular email. There's a reason why we don't automate it. I won't go into that. It makes sure that we create all of the project folders and we schedule all the meetings, fill out a bunch of stuff. So we create all the welcome tasks. We then put them into our MailChimp so we can make sure that they're getting all of our emails. We then pump them into QuickBooks. So that way we can make sure we're billing them, right? And then our recurring billings tool, it's called Stripe, integrates with QuickBooks. So that way every month, that, yeah, every month, that's what we have a bookkeeper for, to the times that for this part, right? And then every month, as the billing's happening, at least something showing up in QuickBooks, right? But all of this is stuff that we don't touch any of this, right? So as soon as somebody gets in, all that administrative work is automatically done for us. The point 5 for e-commerce automation, just I don't know if anyone here is doing e-commerce. There are a couple things that I think are awesome that you can automate. So recommended items, you guys probably get those from Amazon all the time. That's a really cool automation sequence you can put together. Abandoned cart reminders, these things are really great. Recently viewed products, you were on this page, check it out. Some people will start doing discounting after a certain number of days. Purchase history reminders, like don't forget it's time to buy this particular thing, right? That said, automation's not a cure-all, right? And so I want to talk about some of the pitfalls that we've run into. First one is, and this is the one that most everybody does, myself included, right? Start trying to do too much too soon, right? You can spend a lot of time trying to build out the perfect automation, and in a lot of cases that's procrastination for like just pick up the phone and call somebody, right? If you don't have a process, you can't automate it, and so people, we see people trying to build a perfect automation and they don't even have a process. You need to have a process before you can automate something. Second is over-engineering it. Right? And again, I've done this before too, where it's like, okay, well, if this person opens this email, then we'll do this, but then if they open that email and click this link, and then all of a sudden you've got this ridiculous tree of rules that you don't even remember anymore, and so then somebody gets a random case study, and like, how did that happen? I have no clue, because you've over-engineered the automation. So that's a pitfall to watch out for. Next one is expecting too much. Like, automation doesn't remove your job. Right? It's there to help make it a little bit more efficient, to streamline things, and to allow you to do more with less, but it's not there to eliminate the work altogether. You still got to pick up the phone and call the prospect. You still got to close the deal. You should still probably call the person who's a qualified lead that comes in through your inbound channels. Right? You still got to do the work. You still got to have a bookkeeper fix the Stripe integration when it doesn't work properly. And of course, failing to test. This is the other thing that this comes with expecting too much. It's recognizing that there's no such thing as a perfect automation. And we tell this to folks all the time. There's no such thing as a perfect automation. You try something, you test it, you look at the key metrics that you care about. Open rates, different forms of engagement, whatever those things are. But you got to make sure when you go into any kind of automation, one, you have a process, and two, you go in with a test-driven mentality. So there's a lot of different kinds of software out there. I'm not even going to touch a fraction of them. These are just some of the ones that I've liked or used in the past. So yeah, it's not even a little exhaustive. So some tools for outbound prospecting that are worth a look. Yesware is pretty good. ToutApp, although I think that they might have been bought recently, I don't remember. Reply.io. Growbots, this is the one that we use, and I love Growbots. It's awesome. SalesLoft is another good sales automation tool. For inbound nurturing, MailChimp now offers automation with their free packages. Maybe you don't get all the super fancy stuff, but it's a good way to get started with some basic automations. Constant Contact does too. I think you need to upgrade to a certain level to get some of their automations. Infusionsoft allows you to do some really cool kinds of automations. It's pretty sophisticated. In fact, we have one customer where their whole product, honestly, is an Infusionsoft automation. They do what are called these 30-day clean eating challenges. And so every day it's like a recipe, it's like a workout, it's a couple of different things. It's all delivered via email. But the whole product is done through Infusionsoft. It's really cool, and I'm kind of mad that I didn't think about the same thing about it for myself, because that thing actually prints the money and they do no work. Marketo is another good tool, and then Drip, which is associated with another company, Lead Pages. So we didn't spend a lot of time talking about the gather, which is the conversion part of the hungry business metaphor, because the focus really was on hunting and nurturing. But in terms of conversion, and I've done whole things on landing pages. I recommend checking out some of our resources online. Lead Pages, Unbounce, and Wishpond are good tools to increase conversions on your website. A lot of people will tell us, hey, we want to rank in Google. I say, well, why? Because I want more leads. Okay, well, so ranking is a means to that end. Well, how many leads do you get now? Well, I don't get any. Well, I'm looking at your website. You don't even have a contact form, right? You have no offers. And so one of the big mistakes we see people make all the time is they don't engineer for conversion. So it doesn't do any good if you rank in Google if you don't engineer for conversion. So these are some of the tools that can help with that. And then you've got some full systems that can do sales and marketing automation together. Some of them are more expensive than others. HubSpot is kind of the quintessential one. They can do sales automation and marketing automation. ActiveCampaign is one that I like. It's fairly affordable, and it does sales and marketing automation as well. ClickFunnels is another one. They're super, super salesy. If you sign up for ClickFunnels, you will get an email every hour for the rest of your life. But they're good at what they do. And then, of course, Salesforce has all these things as part of their suite as well. So I know I'm coming up on time, so thank you very much. This is most of what I've got. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. If you want the presentation, superweb.pro/LMH-1218. It's not online yet, but it will be soon. So if you click this, we'll let you know when it's ready. Also, I've got this book coming out next quarter. It's called The Hungry Business, and then there's some fine print in there. I'm still working on what I'm going to call it exactly. But we're taking this hungry business metaphor, and we're going to be publishing a whole bunch of guides on this. But we're going to start with the hungry business. And so if you decide that you want to know when that's out, and maybe you want to buy it, Hungry Biz book pre-launch. There's your link right there. And of course, if you want us to take a look at your systems, SuperWebPro free website review, or you can call us at 844-WebPro-5.